Hear ye, look at yonder sights and be enraged, for this is the Hyperloop. Hello everyone, this is me, GameSlayer99, aka No Brainer, and there's been a lot of complaints on some of the forums lately as a new highly exploitable mechanic has come to a lot of people's attentions, and people are demanding certain changes to cards, some erratas, in order to try and prevent this play. This play is the Hyperloop. For those of you who don't know, the Hyperloop involves using Hyperspace Jump, which allows you to end the action phase and switch battlefields, with the Millennium Falcon's special ability, which allows you to repeatedly play Hyperspace Jump, and Cunning, which allows you to use the Millennium Falcon to repeatedly play Hyperspace Jump, along with perhaps some data pads, and more importantly, the Emperor's Throne Room, a battlefield which allows you to resolve a special side without having to have rolled special, just as long as you've got the dice in the pool. Now, what that appears as is, for example, you have the Emperor's Throne Room. It is the start of your turn. The first thing you do is you roll the Millennium Falcon. Alright, cool. You didn't roll it. Alright, your opponent rolls. He rolls, and he gets a really big result. He gets all of the damage sides, all of the mind-proby sides. This looked scary. Okay, I claim Emperor's Throne Room. I end the battle completely. We start again. Your dice go back because I hyperspace jumped, which ends the turn completely. Start of the next turn. Rolling Millennium Falcon, and you just keep repeating and repeating until your opponent gets a bad roll, and then you exploit it by rolling proper dice. That doesn't sound too bad, you say? It's sure, it's a problem, but if you can deal with the Millennium Falcon's die, say with something like a deflect, or you know, some like electroshock and stuff like that, you can deal with that. All right? Yeah, okay, sure. Millennium Falcon's die is used. All right. You spent your action getting rid of the Millennium Falcon die, so you still have nothing in the pool. Then your opponent rolls, he rolls, blah 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 blah. It doesn't matter what that lands up on. Okay, it landed on focus this time. He now has the ability to hyperloop, to lock you with the hyperloop again. And then you're like, okay, so you need 2 dice to deal with. Alright, you can deal with those 2 dice sometimes. Maybe like once or twice a game you can deal with 2 dice at once. Alright, sure. Now for the rest of the game. Because Poe Double Hired Gun, I've been playing that. I've lost to that in the Tabletop Simulator League. Poe Hired Gun without Hyperloop is a strong deck, but then when you put in Hyperloop, it gets kind of ridiculous. Especially with the current tiebreaker rulings, which say that in the event of a game that goes to time, whoever won the previous game is automatically declared the winner if there's only been 1 game played in a best out of 3 so far. Right, so you can win if you win the first game with Poe Hired Gun. You can then just try and stall for literally ever in order to win the second game because of how tiebreaker works. So that's the scary part about Hyperloop. And there isn't currently enough cards in the game which allow you to deal with multiple dice at once when those dice are wildly different. The Millennium Falcon's dice are very big. You can't electroshock unless there's a special, and electroshock is one of the few dice that can deal with Cunning, because Cunning doesn't roll damage. It rolls non-damage, and one of the very few things that can deal with non-damage that's low is electroshock, and you only can have 2 electroshocks in the deck. So you can't deal with both dice at once very often, maybe once or twice, and then the loop is locked in and you can't do anything anymore. But there are some solutions. They're not the best in the world, but there are solutions. So one of the simplest solutions is Django. Okay, cards that allow you to get around the opponent's turn is a very big deal here. Being able to cheat out turns. Django allows you to roll his dice not on his turn, so you just have to deal with the Millennium Falcon die, and then when your opponent rolls a character, you just roll Django, and then you hope for a god roll, and then you can resolve Django on that turn. All right, yeah, that can absolutely work. problem with that, of course, is that Poe High Gun is probably the best counter to Django we've got in the meta. So the Poe deck just doesn't give a damn about the Hyperloop, and instead just plays normally, because that's the biggest worry, right, with this Poe High Gun Hyperloop deck, is that you only need to just run Hyperspace Jump. Everything else can be just normal Poe High Gun. Everything can be normal Poe guns. That's what I'm going to call it now, because Poe High Gun. There. You see, I'll tongue twist myself. So the Poe's Guns deck only needs to play normally in order to be a Django deck. So Django's not a very good counter to this. So what else can deal with this? What else can cheat out turns like Django? Ray. Ray can cheat out turns, especially with Ahan Ray. Ahan Ray is generally regarded as the other top deck alongside Django. They're specifically considered the top decks because they can cheat out turns. But again, Poe's Guns deals really, really well with Han Ray. They've got 30 health, and both of those two decks that cheat out turns are highly aggressive decks that can't deal with that late game of just 30 health. They can't just break through that. They're better than Django, but they're still not great. So that's a problem. So what else do you do? Well, you've got Tactical Mastery. There are definitely some red decks that could use Tactical Mastery to cheat out an action in order to do something. And the same thing with Hit and Run. Hero red decks can use that. Both of those have the ability to cheat out a few turns, but those aren't repeatable effects like Han Ray and Django. You'll use them once, twice a game, and then that's it. And they've got 30 health. Now, I will say, specifically, if you can kill the hired gun that has Cunning on him, it's much easier to deal with the Hyperloop. However, there are 2 Cunnings in the deck and 2 hired guns. So your opponent just stalls and stalls and stalls until, whilst discarding cards from his hand back into the discard, until he gets out his second Cunning, and then he's got 2 Cunnings, and then there's very little you can do again. Right? By the way, that's one of the big things, right? If you want to have a deck that can counter Hyperloop, assume you get the best possible draw, because he will be just stalling you so much that you can basically just search through your deck to find whatever you want. Unless you're very unlucky and your deck cards are at the bottom. But that's what the Cunning can do, right? So once you get the second Cunning out, then it doesn't matter if they kill one character off, and they're only going to have enough hit and runs and tactical masteries to kill one of the 2 hired guns off. But killing the hired gun's a big deal, right? So one of the things that you should be doing, and this is why I did it back in my Tabletop Simulator League game, games 5 and 6, is you need to kill the hired guns first rather than Poe. Poe is not the target in this Poe High Gun Poe's Guns deck. I just made that title longer. Anyway, continuing. So, you've got to kill the hired guns first, and that's 18 health you got to get rid of. Meanwhile, Poe can just be like, hey, I'm just going to put a million different weapons on myself and just start rolling, and then I also might use Hit and Run in my own deck, and then we just have to have Poe God roll, whilst I'm not breaking any of the Hyperloop rules. Right? Turn 1, I go Hit and Run, activate Poe, and then activate Millennium Falcon. I still have the Hyperloop available, but I'm also just resolving Poe's dice. So your opponent gets the ability to shoot you, you don't get the ability to shoot back. Ever. So what's the counter? Well, some people suggest that maybe one of the better things to do is to run characters that are better at taking the battlefield. This is not a lock at all if the Emperor's Throne Room doesn't exist. Okay? Those cards, there's only 3 dice, sure, but they have a 3 side on them. So a Vader Raider doesn't have any better of a chance of, well, yeah, it really doesn't have a better chance of getting rid of taking the battlefield, really. But then you say you do take the battlefield. Well, that's the other thing with Hyperspace Jump. You may switch the battlefield with the battlefield not being used. So you just have to make sure you played Hyperspace Jump normally once, which isn't too terrible because the high guns do generate a lot of resources. It's a bit of a pain, sure, but it's not too terrible, and then you can get the Emperor's Throne Room out anyway. It stalls them, sure. Maybe stalls them long enough for a really powerful aggro deck to potentially kill one of the two hired guns. And then if that aggro deck runs something like Tactical Mastery, they could potentially kill the other one and break the loop. But it'll be very, very difficult. Now some people will say, okay, so what you've got to do here is you've got to claim the battlefield. You've got to stop your opponent from being able to hyperloop by just claiming the battlefield. Then you get first turn, next turn. Then you've got priority, right? Then you've got the ability, you've got the initiative. Then you can do what you want to do. Sure, but your opponent gets an entire turn. An entire turn with Poe High Gun, Poe's guns. That's a perfectly fine deck on its own. Losing an entire turn in order to stop the loop is a bit expensive. And then at the start of the next turn, you roll something, you do a bit of damage, sure, you're able to resolve one thing, and then he claims the Emperor's Throne Room, and this starts again, and he gets an extra free turn at you next time you do this. So what you clearly need to do is not only claim the battlefield, but also use a very, very powerful special side of your own. You want to use the battlefield for yourself. That's the only true way to deal with the Hyperloop. So, the best special in the game is Mind Probe. Pretty much the only other one that could possibly be used here is probably like a Force Throw, to Force Throw like the 3 damage side of Falcon. Really, not really. Really, you just want the Mind Probe here. You need to play the Mind Probe, and you need to then Emperor's Throne Room the Mind Probe. So, Kylo rolls the worst possible die ever. He rolls a bunch of blanks. Just all the blanks in the world. Alright? And then your opponent's like, okay, I've got the Millennium Falcon here, it's got the 3 discard, I'm gonna just roll the high gun, see what I can get. Oh, okay, didn't get great. And then you're like, okay, I'm claiming the battlefield, I'm using Mind Probe, I'm doing 5 damage to this hired gun, who has the cunning. Alright? Sure. Then your opponent gets an entire turn. An entire turn to do whatever he wants. He's probably going to kill Kylo that turn, right? Kylo's probably dead. But then it's the start of your turn. And oh, look at what you've got in your hand. You have a no mercy. You roll Count Dooku, and you pray to the goddamn gods that you get a melee side. I did not get a melee side. You pray to the goddamn gods that you get a melee side. Once more, I didn't get a melee side. You pray to the goddamn gods that you get a melee side. I didn't get a melee side. You pray to the goddamn gods that you get a melee side. I got a melee side, and then you no mercy, and you say, okay, I'm no mercying for 6 to finish off that high gun who has cunning, and I will break the hyperloop. Yeah! Then he plays a second cunning, and you kill yourself. So, as I said before, this deck needs to be fast, okay? You need something that can kill a hired gun, hopefully before he can get the Hyperloop lock. Because once he gets the Hyperloop lock, you only have one shot to kill one other... Well, you can potentially have more than one shot to kill one other hired gun, right? You need to do 9 damage very fast. So this deck I created as a result of my times with Luke Akbar, alright? Now, Luke Akbar has a lot of things going for it. It's got its health, it's got its health, it's got its damage, it's got its upgrades, and I took the upgrades part. I said, let's make a villain deck that can use No Mercy and Power of the Force in order to actually break the Hyperloop. And then let's try and just make it as rushy as possible with the upgrades, like Luke. Because you have access to some ridiculously powerful dark side upgrades like the Kylo Ren lightsaber. You have access to, should I say, the ridiculous upgrade, Kylo Ren's lightsaber, which heroes have instead. They have the really, really powerful one with the Force. But for the sake of this, for the sake of the Hyperloop, you don't want the one with the Force, because the one with the Force doesn't stop a Hyperloop. But hitting someone in the face really hard does. So, it's a Kylo Dooku deck. I could have potentially made this Vader Raider. Vader Tusken, right? That's one thing that the Tusken can do, is that you can roll the Tusken, and then if the Tusken rolls a good dice, you can discard a card from your hand to resolve it immediately to start killing the hired guns off. And now that I mention it, that probably is actually the best way of dealing with Hyperloop, is to use Tusken Raider to just start saying, okay, I'm going to just keep resolving these small 3 damage dices. So, that's another counters. Counter number 2, other than this deck, is to use a Tusken Raider. Maybe Tusken Raider Phasma or something like that. Tusken Raiders are good. But anyway, I've chosen Kylo Dooku because they have a lot of health. Well, no, because you want the No Mercy, so you do Tusken Vader. Yeah. So Vader Raider can work, but also this Kylo Dooku deck. I don't want to play Vader Raider. Vader Raider's too mainstream for me, and I'm a hipster. So let's go. Kylo Dooku. You've got your ridiculous health pools, right? You've got 11 and 10, that's 21. That doesn't sound like a lot, but then Dooku's got like another 3 or 4, so you're looking more like 14, 11, that's 25, that's really good health. Damage sides. You have to pay for Kylo's damage side. But he does have the special, and the special is really good against Poe decks because Poe decks use very expensive cards, right? They use their Millennium Falcons for 5, they use their Launch Base for 5, they use their DL-44s for 3, they'd use the Hyperloop, which is 3. They have some very expensive cards, so Kylo can potentially rush them down with his own specials. And you've got something for the Emperor's Throne Room to use, right? And along with Dooku, you know, Dooku's good. But there's a maximum potential of 8 damage here, just base, which is fine. Nothing to write home about, but nothing terrible either. Dooku has some focus size to focus some more of his supports if he needs to. I'd have loved if Kylo Ren had a focus size instead of that shield, but oh well. Armory as the battlefield, of course, because you need the armory well, no, you don't need the armory. You don't need the armory, but I love the armory when I've got these upgrade heavy decks. I just love the armory. There might be a better version, but anyway, moving on. So you've got obviously the Sith Holocron. There's no reason why you won't place 2 Sith Holocrons. By the way, all the cards that I'm showing down here, they're all 2s of. So Sith Holocron, it was just too good to ignore. Just too good to ignore. It can really help with the rush, right? You put that down, you got a Mind Probe out. It's insane. Force Training, of course, because it's one of the very few, one of the very few 2 costs. Force Training has always just been very good, very decent bang for your buck, especially when you can get Imperial Armory out and it binds all things. Force Choke, you have some mitigation here, turning character dice and upgrade dice to any side. Very useful for down my opponent, because slowing your opponent is a very big deal. In Poe High Gun, you want to make sure you can slow down him getting the Hyperloop working, and you do that by killing one of his characters, but also making sure that he can't get resources. So you might want to force choke some of his resources away. Okay, and there's the double disrupt side there as well. That's the other big deal, right? The double disrupt, very useful, and the one discard. Discarding can be very good for getting rid of the Millennium Falcons, right? That's the other reason why Dooku's so good here, is because you can potentially discard away his Millennium Falcon. Just play like that, and if you get lucky, you get lucky, right? They don't have Starship Graveyard, they're running Emperor's Throne Room, so they probably will run Scavenge in order to get the Millennium Falcon back, but you know, you might be able to do some milling there. Of course, Kyle's lightsaber. Oh my god. I wish Luke Akbar had this. I so wish Luke Akbar had that. That's so good damage. And both these guys have damage sides. You're gonna run it. Force Throw, just a great card. Has 2 disrupt sides. Just a great card. Mind Probe, that's what you need to counter Hyperlock. You need to be able to do the 5 damage when you claim the Emperor's Throne Room. And then Hide in Shadow. I've got hit purely because it helps keep Kylo alive against anything that's not Hyperloop. That's the thing, right? I'm building this as an anti-Hyperloop deck, but I also want to see it do well, right? This might end up being a good deck. I don't know for certain, because I'm going to be honest, I've not tested this at time of recording. Never tested this. This is all 100% theory. I'm a bit of a fraud. It binds all things. Now, most villain decks don't like running It Binds All Things. Vader Raider specifically uses just the Sith Holocron. You can get away with that, but I prefer the idea of using It Binds All Things as well, so you're not relying on the Sith Holocron, because a lot of decks these days a lot of Django decks use Disarm and stuff, and Sith Holocron's a bit slow. Actually, it can be a bit slow, especially if you're not rolling those upgrades. So It Binds All Things, I think, is just a bit more, you know, having more economy is always great in a rush deck. Moving on. Boundless Ambition, this could potentially be discarded, but I've got this as a better way to get out No Mercy and Power of the Force. Right? I've got Boundless Ambition as a better way to look for Mind Probes, look for Kylo Ren's lightsabers. It's nice when you discard your entire hand. It's the end of the map. It's the end of the turn almost. You drop to your hand size, and then you can decide if you want to discard those cards if you don't want or not. Feel your anger. That's a potential way of dealing with As another potential way of dealing with, you know, Hyperloop. You've got your opponent's like, okay, I'm gonna start. You've rolled terribly. I'm gonna start rolling dice. Oh, I got 2 blanks. Oh, and then you go, okay, now I can remove both the Cunning die and the Millennium Falcon die. There we go. Hyperloop broken for 1 turn. Now I've just got to try and win. And you just try and win with No Mercy. No Mercy and Power of the Force, specifically. Power of the Force, you can have a maximum of 6 upgrades on your characters. These characters are tanky. They're not going to die necessarily very quickly. So you can get a good, like, you should be able to get a good 3 or 4 of Power of the Force. And so and you could use that on the 1 damage side to turn it to a 3 damage side. Very, very powerful. Would not use this in a Vader Raider, though, because Vader already starts off with 3 damage, so, you know. And you can also just use this for resources, like you've got 2 Sith Holocrons out, you can use it as resources, or you can use it as discarding 4, or, you know, 3 shields. 3 focus, you could use it for 3 focus. That's always very powerful. There's a lot you can do with Power of the Force. But we was talking about No Mercy, we were supposed to be talking about No Mercy, and No Mercy is just No Mercy. You love No Mercy, don't even... No, No Mercy is... This is kind of the reason why you play pure blue villain, is for No Mercy. Because you say, okay, this turn I'm doing an extra 4 damage that you just never saw coming. Just so good. So good. Turns games. It completely and utterly turns games. Isolation. Slow down that post, slow down the hired gun, slow down the game. From his perspective, trying to make it harder to get out of the Hyperloop. I don't like Isolation normally, but against a Poe deck, it's specifically very good, and it can work very well against the Django decks that are coming out, because Django might just not... Because a lot of people like to throw down like jetpacks on Django, and then you remove the Django die that can work with the jetpacks, right? So Isolation can work there. Deflect, another card that can work against the Hyperloop. Millennium Falcon rolls its 4 damage, you deflect it, 2 damage to something else, and the Millennium Falcon die is gone, and now you just need to get rid of 1 more die, which is actually kind of hard with this. Vader Raider has Electroshock, this deck does not, but you know, you do have access to use the Force. That doesn't help with Hyperloop in the slightest, but use the Force is cool. I like use the Force. It'll potentially fix your dice or someone else's dice if you need to. And finally, we've already talked about Power of the Force. So I've slowly managed to convince myself throughout the recording of this that Vader Raider is probably the best counter to Hyperloop because of the Tusken's natural built-in ability to resolve no matter what. But Kylo Dooku, I feel like, is something that people haven't experimented with very much. It's not something that you think about initially when you think about decks that could rush people down. You generally put Dooku with the Grievous and you leave it at that. But Kylo, I think, has some potential, and I think having 2 Kylo die and a Dooku die is better than having 2 Grievous die. I genuinely believe that. And access to red isn't that big of a deal because you only have access to Tactical Mastery right now. So I don't know what you might think about this, but I feel like this is a potential good counter to the Hyperloop, and I feel like it's a potential good tier 2 deck in general. We'll see. I plan to test this now. I'm going to go record some videos of me playing this deck. So, look out for those. So I hope you now know what the Hyperloop is, at least, and if you see a Hyperloop player, I don't advocate violence. I don't like people being mean. Express your anger by talking about the fact that you're mad that he's running Hyperloop because it's kind of just not fun broken where both sides just sit around doing nothing. It's been me, GameSlide99, aka No Brainer. Thank you for watching. Signing off.